Every marriage requires sacrifice, and Jesus' sacrifice is the ultimate demonstration of covenantal love. The cross is not just an act of atonement, it is a defining moment where the relationship between God and his people is restored. Hey, welcome back to the channel. What if I told you the Bible isn't just a book of doctrines, rules, or theology? What if I told you it's something much more personal? A marriage story. And not just any marriage story, but the ultimate union between God and his people. This isn't just an analogy. The entire biblical narrative, from Genesis to Revelation, centers on one theme: God pursuing a committed covenant relationship with humanity, much like a groom commits to his bride. But here's the key: a covenant relationship requires participation. God wants to know us and be known by us. And when we truly embrace this, it changes everything: how we understand faith, discipleship, leadership, and relationships with others, ourselves, and creation. So today, we're going to walk through this incredible marriage narrative. And by the end, my hope is that you'll see why this impacts how we live, how we lead, how we build relationships, and how we view and tell our stories. Every marriage has a beginning, and ours starts in Genesis. God creates Adam and declares that it is not good for him to be alone. This is the first time in creation that something is described as not good, highlighting the importance of relationship and companionship. God puts Adam into a deep sleep, and from his side, he creates Eve. When Adam wakes, he recognizes her as part of himself, exclaiming, "This at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." Genesis 2:23. This moment is more than just the first human relationship. It is the foundation of marriage as a sacred institution. But this is more than just a human relationship. It's a prophetic image of something greater. Adam's deep sleep foreshadows Jesus' death. The opening of Adam's side prefigures Christ's pierced side on the cross. And the creation of Eve from Adam mirrors the church being established through Christ's fleshly and bloody sacrifice. Before sin ever entered the world, God was already illustrating the significance of covenant unity and sacrifice. Marriage was always and has always been meant to reflect something much bigger: a relationship between God and his people. Fast forward to Exodus, God rescues his people from slavery in Egypt and brings them to Mount Sinai, where he'll give them the 10 Commandments. But this just isn't a moment of instruction. It's the formalization of a covenant relationship. This moment in the story plays out and reflects the structure of a wedding ceremony. The 10 Commandments are more than just laws, they are wedding vows. They define the terms of the relationship between God and his people, just as vows define the commitment between a husband and wife. The cloud covering Mount Sinai represents God's presence, much like a wedding canopy. And when the Israelites respond, "We will do everything the Lord has said," in Exodus 19:8, it mirrors a couple exchanging their vows at the altar. But there's a problem. Even before the covenant is fully established, the people break it. While Moses is on the mountain receiving God's instructions, the Israelites create and worship a golden calf. It's the equivalent of a bride-to-be being unfaithful on the wedding night. Yet rather than abandoning them, God remains faithful. He disciplines, restores, and renews the covenant. And this just isn't history, it's our story. We have all been unfaithful and rebelled against God. We have all chosen to worship the calf. And yet God continues to pursue us, offering restoration and renewal. His commitment is unwavering, showing true covenant love looks like. Now fast forward in the biblical narrative, again a story that plays out as a single redemptive narrative to Jesus and his ministry. When Jesus begins his ministry, he constantly refers to weddings and marriage to describe his relationship with his followers. He uses these examples to teach about preparation, commitment, and the coming kingdom. In the parable of the wedding banquet in Matthew 22, a king invites guests to a great feast, but many reject the invitation. This mirrors how people respond to God's call. Some accept, but others choose to remain distant. In the parable of the 10 virgins in Matthew 25, Jesus warns his followers to be prepared for the arrival of the groom, emphasizing the importance of readiness and vigilance. John the Baptist even calls Jesus the bridegroom in John 3:29, reinforcing the idea that Jesus has come to establish a new covenant relationship with his people. Jesus isn't just using weddings as a metaphor. He is pointing to the fulfillment of God's marriage story told from the beginning, foreshadowed before the fall. His mission is to establish a lasting covenant relationship with his people, one that will ultimately be fulfilled at the final wedding celebration. Every marriage requires sacrifice, and Jesus' sacrifice is the ultimate demonstration of covenantal love. The cross is not just an act of atonement, it is the defining moment where the relationship between God and his people is restored. When Jesus' side is pierced on the cross, it directly connects to Adam's side being opened. Just as Eve was formed from Adam's body, the church is born through Christ's sacrifice. The tearing of the temple veil signifies the removal of the barrier between God and humanity, granting us full access to him, where his spirit and presence tabernacle in our hearts. Jesus' death isn't just about forgiveness, it's about reconciliation and restored intimacy in relationship with God. The cross reminds us that love requires commitment, selflessness, and sacrifice. True covenant relationships aren't based on convenience, but on unwavering faithfulness. Just as Christ laid down his life for the church, we are called to live in a way that reflects his commitment to us. The Bible begins with a marriage, and that theme is the grand arc of the narrative all the way to the end of the story. In Revelation 19:7, we see the ultimate culmination of God's plan. Let us rejoice and be glad, but give him glory. For the wedding of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. The final event in human history is a marriage celebration, the union of Christ and his people, his church. This isn't just something to anticipate in the distant future, it's a call to live in preparation now. God's kingdom is a present and future reality. Just as a couple prepares for their wedding day, we are called to prepare ourselves spiritually, growing in our relationship with Christ and aligning our lives with his will. This marriage supper is the fulfillment of everything we've been invited into, a perfect, eternal union and relationship with God. And the lengths that he went to pursue us, to show that he's been looking for us and he sees us. Well, we see those efforts culminate on the cross. Kurt Thompson says it this way: everyone comes into the world looking for someone, looking for him or her. God is looking for you. He sees you, and he's pursuing you. So what does this mean for us today? Understanding the Bible as a marriage ceremony changes how we live. It moves us beyond simply knowing theology to actively participating in a relationship with Jesus. This is not just about learning doctrines. It's about being shaped by our relationship with God. When we see ourselves as people in covenant with him, it transforms how we relate to him. When we see ourselves as people made in his image, people who he is pursuing and seeking out, people he wants to know and be known by, we no longer approach faith as simply a list of rights and wrongs, but as a committed partnership where we continually grow in trust, love, and faithfulness. Leadership in the church is not just about teaching information. It's about guiding others into a deeper understanding of their relationship with God. True leaders help people see themselves in the grand story of God's faithfulness. They don't just share facts, they help others step into the covenant and live it out in their daily lives. If God's commitment to us is faithful, pursuing, and sacrificial, our relationships should reflect that same kind of love and pursuit. Marriage, friendships, and discipleship should all mirror this deep commitment and mutual knowing. We are called to model God's love by being faithful, present, and selfless in our relationships. This isn't just a theological concept, it's a personal invitation. The question isn't just whether we believe in God, but whether we are actively engaging in the relationship he has invited us into. And because he loves us, he gives us a choice. We're not forced into this relationship. We're given the will to accept the invitation or deny it. to live in this covenant relationship with God or rebel against it. The choice is yours. The marriage ceremony has been set. The celebration is coming, and we're all invited. And when we understand that great narrative arc, we can begin to find our role and place in that story. Thanks for listening.